In a historic election, Botswana's political coalition umbrella for democratic change, also known as UDC, has unseated the ruling Botswana Democratic Party, BDP, ending more than half a century of its dominance since independence. President Masisi conceded to UDC leader Duma Boko, a former human rights lawyer, and pledged a peaceful transfer of power, which he did. At 54, Boko achieved this breakthrough victory for UDC on his third attempt, marking a transformative moment in Botswana's political landscape. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to CSIS Africa. I'm Mvemba Pezo Bizolele, Director and Senior Fellow of the Africa Program here at CSIS. Boko's campaign resonated with citizens, particularly the youth, as he promised job creation, economic reform, and change. The UDC secured a commanding majority in parliament, while the BDP won only 4 seats, underscoring widespread frustration with economic stagnation and rising unemployment. Botswana's heavy reliance on diamonds has made its economy vulnerable to downturns in the global diamond market. Although Botswana has a history of strong democratic practices and peaceful transitions, this election signals a new chapter as voters demand a shift away from the BDP's long-standing policies to address urgent economic challenges. Today, we have engaged a very stellar and informed panel of analysts from Botswana who are joining us from Gaborone. Ms. Kahino Molahwa, who's Executive Director of Botswana Council of Non-Governmental Organizations, Bokongo, Tapelo Ndlovu, who's an independent journalist, and Sonia Haubulahi, who's Research and Advocacy Manager and Policy Analyst at Botswana Center for Public Integrity. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Kaiso, we will start with you. What were the key factors that led to the Botswana Democratic Party's defeat after 6 decades or so in power? What lesson can other long-standing ruling parties in the region learn from this defeat?
So much, Mvemba, for having me on the platform. We're grateful. Kariso Molatla from Botswana Council of NGOs, as you said. Indeed, this is a very historic moment for the country. It's a very historic year, a historic era for the country. As you indicated, the Botswana Democratic Party had been in power for the past 58 years, and over time, there's been growing pressure. The elections have been getting more and more contested over the years. In 2014, we saw the closest contest, and then 2019 as well, after the opposition united under a coalition. And over the years, particularly in this year's elections, 2024, there were a number of concerns among the citizenry, key amongst which being the state of the economy. Right now, in the lead up to elections, we've seen something we've never seen in the state of our economy. We've seen diamond sales go down. We've seen government revenues in terms of the government investment account go to the lowest. This coupled with the high unemployment rate amongst the young people. And, we have a very youthful population in Botswana, as you may recall. And there's been growing frustration, particularly amongst the youth, in terms of the unemployment rate that they are grappling with. And linked to that, young people have generally been getting frustrated because they've been feeling that, those that get elected into power, once they're in power, they tend to forget about those that put them in office and instead seem to pursue their own self-interest. So there have been such sentiments generally among the citizenry. And particularly amongst the first-time voters and the younger population. And added to that, the advent of social media that has helped to spread the message much quicker, particularly among the young people. They're exchanging information much quicker, they're sharing experiences much quicker, they're able to, engage and somewhat influence each other. So it's been quite a highly contested election, the outcome of which nobody foresaw. I want to believe the only person who had somewhat of a glimpse of what would happen would possibly be the current president himself, because he kept maintaining that he's going into these elections to win them. And I think, frankly, none of us, particularly in the civil society and other sectors, there had been a lot of talk about a hung parliament and things like that. Nobody imagined a clean sweep, if I'm to call it. So there's been a number of factors that have contributed to what we saw unfolding on the 30th of October. The current voter is not your old-time voter who's just looking at piecemeal approaches. Voters are now looking for solutions to their everyday lived realities, lived problems. So I think that is what largely contributed to what we saw unfolding on the 30th of October at the polls. Thank you.
Tapelo, from where you sit, how did you experience this, and what causes will you underline as the drive of this defeat?
Thank you very much. Well, I think Kariso has the right to raise issues around economy and so on. I think maybe to avoid repeating the same thing, but still emphasizing that the central point really was the economy going down. People actually feared that the West was still to come. I think there was an element of fear. That element of fear, in my view, played a very important role in people now feeling that it was time for DDT to get out of the power and give others a chance. I think DDT also aided the change, because it was also it sensed that people were angry, and we saw a lot of desperation from the ruling party, especially towards the election. They came up with activities, programs that were obviously political, and people who were always thinking that they could rely on the party now actually saw that most of the programs were just campaign programs, and they made that decision on the spot that enough is enough. We need now to change. Someone once said Botswana was not changing, or people were not changing the government because they were not frustrated enough. I think I observed that this time around, that indeed the frustration levels were really high, because when the government came up with the same programs at the same time simultaneously, it will come up with some austerity measures, which now actually made it clear that there was a problem of the economy. And then we will have the big one that came out towards elections. Maybe within 3 months towards elections was the depleting of the government saving accounts, the foreign reserves as well. So people kind of, now it got dramatized. The decline of the economy was dramatized in such a way that people thought, if we give these people 2 months more, we are going to find ourselves in trouble. So some people keep on saying the opposition won of course, because they promised a lot, and some people believe in that, but also because people wanted to vote out the BDP, the ruling party, and the nearest party that was in the right place at the right time, then got their vote. So those who wanted to vote it out included the BDP members as well. So I would say when I round it up, I would say here actually made a lot of impact, the frustration, the desperations of the ruling party as well, without mentioning the relationship with Botswana or the BS actually, not Botswana. That brings in another point. The president at the time, I think his character as well played a role in making people go against him, because you must realize that the party popularity has been declining maybe for the past 4 or so elections. But because of the first past the post electoral system, that was not actually visible enough for the world to see that the ruling party was actually declining in popularity. So they were always hanging around the 50%. At one point, it actually went down to around 46, 47%. But the problem then was the opposition was not able to consolidate itself and make that 50% or 51% profitable for themselves. So I think right now then the strategy was if you feel frustrated, just vote out the BDP. Where you are taking your vote matters little now, but just vote out the BDP. And I believe that works. You have an opposition party that won with a clear majority, and then the second opposition party also won with a decent numbers. So you are going to have a former opposition party. One is the ruling party, and the other is an official opposition party. Yeah.
Thank you,
Sure
Tapelo. Thank you, Tapelo. Yeah, thank you very much. I think what we've heard so far is that there is a change of profile in the voter, considering the youth of the population there. The increased expectations, Tapelo, you talk about economic trauma in a way. So there is also a change in behavior and expectations, and then the declining popularity of the president. Sonia, as you consider the same question, why, I would like to add one thing, why did it happen now? After all, it's been 50, 80 years. What triggered it? What kind of got the voters across to the line that you are today?
Thank you so much, Vemba, and once again, good evening good evening from our side. Anyway, I understand it's morning time on your side. To those that are joining our discussion tonight. Well, to perhaps maybe start with the issue of the decline. So the eventuality of BDP losing power was known, and it was showing itself in previous elections, right? Just starting from the issue of them losing the majority of the popular vote, as much as they were propped up by our electoral system. It was clear that in terms of preference, a large majority, well, not a large majority at the time, but that majority of Botswana had started shifting away from the BDP and what it was providing at the time and what it would occasionally promise every 5 years in the event of elections. But the now conversation now is that I've been saying that, going into these elections, the understanding amongst Botswana and the political parties on the field was that the country is in crisis. So everybody believed that the country is in crisis. Retapelo did mention that as well, that as much as it was dramatized, rightfully or wrongfully so, but everybody was made to believe that we are in dire straits, essentially. And with that being the mentality of the voter or the position of the voter, they then looked to the parties for solutions. Now, in terms of the blame for the crisis that we're in, it was clear that the finger would point to the ruling party at the time. It would in any other scenario as well. The finger was blaming there, but to top it all off, now when Botswana were looking to the parties to hear each party's plan to get them out of crisis mode, it seemed that only the BDP did not seem to be alive to the issue of Botswana believing that we are in crisis mode. It may be that they were tone deaf. It may be that the party truly did not believe that the country was in crisis mode. But now they were bearing a twofold burden in that they are blamed for the crisis that the country is in. And also out of everybody else, they are the only ones not coming forth with any sort of clear plan. I'm not sure if you heard that, of the issue that happened a couple of weeks prior to the elections, where one of the last acts of parliament before it dissolved to make way for the elections, one bill that was tabled, or at least two bills by the ruling party, was one that was propositioning essentially inflating benefits that are due to a president after their stay in power, and then also extending those benefits to their children and surviving spouse in the event of the death of a former president. So you can imagine a situation where everybody's alarm bells are going off, and when they look for answers, one party is not only resting on its laurels, but it seems they are looking out for number one in this situation being the leadership at that time. So I think more than anything, that was one of the issues that contributed majorly to the loss of the BDP, specifically in this electoral cycle, even though, like I said, it was now becoming clear that it would eventually happen. And I think secondly as well, now Mama Lafa mentioned earlier that Botswana has a very large youth population, and if you look at the issues that are currently afflicting Botswana, they affect that youth population. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the latest findings of the Afrobarometer survey, where they pointed out that prior to the election, the number one issue that Botswana were considering was unemployment. And the biggest victims of Botswana's unemployment problem are the young people who have, with each electoral cycle, been increasing in terms of the share, the population share of the electorate. So you look at it in that sense, that the people that constituted the most out of the voting group were also the people that had the biggest gripe with the then government. So it would then make sense that they will look elsewhere for a solution to a problem that they believe and see that the then government was struggling to address. The unemployment problem has been rising steadily over the years. So that was the unemployment problem. Also with corruption, young people, like I said, and it's also been shown that young people are very active on social media. If you look at the headlines, news headlines in recent years, just maybe from last year, October last year, October this year, January this year, maybe last year to October this year, every week on social media, there would be at least one newspaper that has on its front page one issue or the other related to allegations of corruption. So you can imagine a young person who's struggling with unemployment, is on social media, unwillingly so, but as a pastime. And every time they are online, they are made privy, sometimes exaggerated, but they are made privy to the fact that the leadership of the country is not only addressing the unemployment problem, but they are benefiting unduly so from being put in that position to address that same problem. So I think now when we put all of those factors together, it made a ripe moment in the event of October 30th for that to be the fall of the mighty BDP after 58 years at the helm.
Thank you very much, Ma. But you also, the party just had undertaken consultations with the population. Did not they learn from what the populations wanted during that consultations? We'll go back to Tapelo, Kahiso, and then Sonia.
May you repeat the question? Hello?
Yes, the party had just undertaken popular consultation about the constitutional review. During those consultations, they should have gotten a lot of feedback from the populations. Did they ignore those feedback? And what happened with those? Because that would have given them a sense of where the people were and how the people felt about the PDP.
Okay, I think there was a lot of complacency. The party actually thought it was nothing will touch it. So even the feedback that it got, it never really worked on it. You will see when you look at the character of the president, like I said earlier on, the way he acted, the theatrics that he performed before rallies and so on, the way he dealt or responded to issues of the peers actually showed a party that was ignoring the feedback. It showed a party that was actually thinking that it knows everything. It has been in power for 58 years, so no one really could tell it anything. So, yes, it was ignoring the feedback. Now, even after the election, there are so many voice notes from the party members who are very angry that the leadership failed them. They think that all along they had been there were warnings that it was going south, but the party ignored. So I think complacency is the key, and also that some problems were deep rooted. They were not easy to solve at the right time. The issue of the diversification, for example, is something that the party failed way back. So it was not something that you can do quickly to save yourself from imminent election. So that cost the party a lot because when you look at the reliance on the diamond, so the moment the diamond slumped, it meant that there was no alternative that would come in and save the economy at the right time. So yes, complacency.
Kahiso, how did the consultations, how did the party fail to heed to the feedback they got from the people during those consultations?
Thank you. I'm glad you brought up the issue of the constitution amendment process and bill, which in my view would constitute what one in football would call an own goal. There were a lot of issues and concerns raised around the constitution amendment. As civil society, we had been very vocal. We had been engaging with the communities, and the general feeling was that one, the constitution review process was not people-centered. It was not people-driven. It was rushed, and people generally felt it was wrong timing and that it was done for the wrong reasons. It was done to tick a box because the ruling party then, in 2019, had promised that they would engage in a comprehensive review of the constitution. So that, and the process itself then turned out to be quite flawed in that it was, in our view as civil society, centered around the presidency. And in addition to the flawed process, subsequently, the content itself made things worse. The proposals that were being put forth, the citizenry didn't feel like what they wanted was reflected in the outcome of that process. So people generally felt frustrated. The consultations, we kept maintaining that those consultations were not sufficient. And like I said, the people just generally felt this process had been taken away from the people. constitution about people determining for themselves how they want to be governed. But this one tended to revolve around the presidency and what the powers be wanted. So, and in addition to that, there was also the bill that Sonia mentioned as well. There were a lot of bills that came forth to the floor of parliament that were just going off tangent to the needs of the people. And that, generally frustrated the population. People felt we are talking, but we're being ignored. We are talking, but we're not being heard. So we will use our power, which is the vote on the 30th. Botswana felt so frustrated. For a long time, they felt, and I think linked to that, you'd recall that parliament proceedings in Botswana are broadcast live on TV. So Botswana had the opportunity to witness live the engagements of the people they've elected live in parliament. So even when the voting on the Constitution Amendment Bill came, they were very attentive to who's voting along what line. Are these parliamentarians with us, the people, or they are doing this for themselves? And even subsequently now in the lead up to elections, during the engagements at the political rallies, they would be upfront with with those that were campaigning for office to ask, how did you vote? Did you vote with us, the people, or against us, the people? So, like I said, in our view, in my view, that was an own goal to even embark on that process during an election year and to try and rush it and squeeze it through. So people generally felt we're not being heard and we'll use the only voice that we have. Thank you.
Sonia, did the Botswana youth, engage fully in the constitutional review in those consultations, or they were kept on the periphery and the PDP was not able to capture their frustration properly? You did mention the issues of unemployment, disillusionment with the system, and this is very, very serious point of contention among the youth.
Okay, well, in terms of the constitutional review process and the youth involvement there, I think the process had started in, is it 2021, when the Constitutional Review Commission started the traveling around the country soliciting views. And they did that from 2022 for a couple of months in 2022. So in that time, I would say only a small portion of the youth kept up with that, similar to many other issues around governance. It didn't really have any significant youth involvement. From there on, the Constitutional Review Commission published their report stating to the president what views Botswana shared regarding changes they would like to see. And, they then made recommendations to the president in that regard that, they said they want direct election of the president, but we recommend that you keep the current system and so forth and so forth. But even then, like I said, it was more an engagement, or civil society was the most active at that time. But the time that now the youth tuned in to the Constitutional Review Commission in large numbers prior to what had been prevailing, is when now the bill came to parliament. The bill comes to parliament, civil society is explaining the contents of the bill, shocking as they were, academia, the media, everybody's sharing the contents. When now the youth is, I guess, caught off guard in terms of how does any of these things that are said to be in that bill, how do they benefit any of us? They are then made privy to the fact that, in fact, this is a 2-year-long fight that those of us in civil society have been fighting. This process has been flawed from the start. So now, coupled with all those other issues that I mentioned, now the issues are many at that point. Now this is at that point this year, only a couple of months out of election day. Youth are frustrated about unemployment, about corruption. Now there's this issue of a constitutional amendment bill that seems to be hell-bent on settling scores. There was, certain provisions that were very clearly targeting certain people. You can imagine you are looking at your government to solve extreme economic conditions that you find yourself in, such as those graduates that are over 5 years post-graduation, have never held down a job. You can imagine people like that. They find out that the administration has deemed it worthy to try and amend the bill to include provisions such as barring former presidents from coming back to active politics, provisions that are very clearly targeted at former President Khama, who is the only president in the history of the country to have not only come back to politics post the presidency, but also now in the form of being anti the ruling party that he was at the helm of. So such provisions within the constitutional amendment bill and that process only added to an already dissatisfied young population. That is why even at that point, they were able to be roped into the conversation. They were already frustrated, standing ready to take action around issues that affected them. And I think in the, I guess, partly in defense of the BDP, I think on top of perhaps, yes, not taking into consideration Botswana's views, which they had done for a while, I think they also did not think they reflected a desire to take them out of power. Every election has always had issues and, certain issues that people are unhappy with. So I think at some point, the BDP truly believe that even if there are issues that Botswana are unhappy with, it can never equate to we are unhappy, therefore it's time for a change of government. It has always been we are unhappy with 1, 2, 3, where 1, 2, 3 are issues of concern that change with every electoral cycle. There's always been we are happy with 1, 2, unhappy with 1, 2, 3. But then it's always, let's give them another chance, or the government is working towards this problem. Let's give them time for fruits of their labor to start showing. So I think in part, yes, they didn't listen, but another part, they did listen. They just didn't think the grievances would result in what then ultimately prevailed, where they were rejected overwhelmingly. So I think Mamula mentioned the conversation of people that tried to make predictions around the possible outcomes. They were more centered around perhaps a coalition government. But even the very few people that might have predicted a win for opposition, they always then put BDP as being second to whatever party that would be. So the overwhelming rejection, where they are the minority party, was far from the realm of imagination of anybody as predictions. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We will now open it to questions from the audience. And Sonia, I know you have to go soon, so we'll start with you. The couple questions just have come through our lines here. The first one is, what could have resulted in poor BDP performance in these elections, given the composure and preparedness of this election compared to the UDC? That's question number one. Question number two is, how much did Khama's fallout with Masisi and the party play into the BDP's election loss? So those are the first two questions we just got. And we can start with you, Sonia, and then Rahata Pelo and Makahiso can take the rest.
I'm not sure if I got the first question right, but you'll correct me if I'm wrong. I think the question was asking what led to BDP's loss.
Defeat, correct. Considering that they were so prepared, and as far as this audience member is concerned, UDC was not as well prepared as the party. Of course, the party has resources that typically the opposition does not.
Well, like I had been pointing out, in terms of preparedness, or at least insofar as preparedness we equated to resonating with the electorate, BDP was the least prepared. I don't know if you had perhaps had a chance to look at the footage of the presidential debate just a week prior to the election. Even if by all metrics, even if somebody who did not know which the incumbent president going into that debate, if they were to look at it and rank best to worst, BDP was worse than performance in that debate. And the terrible performance attributing to a lack of touching on any of the issues that were the most concerning to Botswana. So I think I would have to define that they were the most prepared and say that, in fact, they were the least prepared because they were the ones who, for whatever reason, it could be internal issues, it could be whatever, a flaw in their metrics. But for whatever reason, they were the one party who seemed to not be able to read the mood of the electorate in terms of what they were looking for and their state of mind, which, like I said, everybody was on, we are in crisis mode.
Question number 2 is, how much did incomers fall out with Masisi and the party play into the BDP's loss? I think you referred that to a little bit. Do you want to expand, please?
Yes, I think with the soured relations between the two, if you remember, going into the 2019 election, in fact, the association of former President Khama with the UDC at the time has largely been blamed for their 2019 loss, for the UDC's 2019 loss, because in the frame of mind of the electorate at the time, Khama was the enemy number one, if I should put it like that. The country wanted nothing to do with him, and at the time, opposition, specifically UDC, was made to be the one representing bringing back Khama. But now, in the 5 years, on all of the other issues that we've been mentioning as the mistakes or the faults of the BDP, another perhaps on goal, to borrow the words of Mamolaf, is that in their handling of the fallout between President Masisi and President Khama, there were proven instances where the government fabricated charges against former President Khama. So that reframed how he appeared to the electorate, where now amongst the young people and everybody else who had specific gripes and axes to grind with the government, they then considered former President Khama to be one of them, to be a victim of the then government, like everybody else. Young people, unemployment. Former President Khama, people are out to get him. They are fabricating charges and treating him anyhow. Old people, they are poor and destitute. All these issues then made former President Khama become a victim. But I think in terms of the overall outcome, if you look at the party that Khama is a patron of, it's only third in terms of the number of seats. It only beat the BDP, and that at 1 seat. So when we point out the major factors, we find that he wasn't one of the major factors, but he definitely played a role, and an entirely different one compared to the 2019 elections.
So the third question, you can add to what Masonia just talked about, but I want you to address the third question primarily. How did this campaign resonate with young people, and what was the messaging around economic opportunities or reforms?
Thank you. Maybe just to quickly add to what Sonia said, the fallout between former President Khama and former President Masisi was perhaps downfalls for the former President Masisi, in that it preoccupied the 5 years of his reign from 2019. And people felt, we are not benefiting anything from this conflict. We are tired. We don't know why these two men have fallen out. We're not interested. That's it. So that was, a big, I think a big distraction of the former ruling party. Now on to the campaign focus. Young people were looking for a party that is offering solutions to their plight as far as unemployment is concerned. Young people were looking for a party that is offering solutions as far as the current state of the economy is concerned. Like we said earlier on, we have a high unemployment rate, and it's highest among the young people. So when you look at the UDC manifesto, number one, it was very clear in terms of, we're going to create 100,000 jobs per year, and we are going to increase the minimum wage to make it 4,000 pula. We are going to increase student allowances to 2,500. So young people were able to connect with that. You know, the statistics are there and the numbers are there. And then when you look at the BDP manifesto, they felt it was not very clear in terms of what are you offering. We're unemployed. How many jobs are you going to create? The economy is going down. How are you going to revive the economy? We're still heavily reliant on diamonds. What are you going to do to diversify the economy? And even worse, for the BDP, because they had been in power for 58 years, people are looking for the BDP to account, to say, where is the money? We're saying we're hearing the economy is down. We are hearing that the government investment account is at its highest, at its lowest low. Where's the money? They were not getting the accountability. And the stories that were coming out, the reports that were coming out around corruption, that made it worse. So young people were looking for solutions. They were looking for a party that was offering solutions that connect to the everyday lived reality. They were not looking for the usual rhetoric to say, you know, do this and the other without, you know, hearing exactly what you're saying. They were looking for solutions, and they voted for a party that felt was speaking to the issues connected to the everyday lived reality.
Thank you very much. Our friend Sonia Haubulai will depart. So Sonia, thank you for joining us. Kaya boha. Kaya leboha ma.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to your audience and of course my fellow panelists I am wishing you a fruitful rest of the discussion, and I'm looking forward to engaging more. I think the next 5 years and especially the next 100 days are going to be a cause for much conversation. So I'm hoping yourself and also audiences, or the audience that join us today, will keep in touch.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Ratapelo, to you, there's another question here. What are the prospective Botswana-Zimbabwe relations? What are the prospective for Botswana-Zimbabwe relations under Boko, including this proposal to give residency and work permit to exiled Zimbabweans, especially given high Botswana youth unemployment rate?
Wow, that's a tricky one. I think the Botswana-Zimbabwe relations have always been fluctuating. You remember during Ian Khama, there was more antagonism at the time, with Khama raising issues, being the only or the leading president in the region who was raising issues against Mugabe. And then came Masisi. His role then, he wanted to bring back the relationship and actually went into the extreme of becoming very close with the president of Zimbabwe, Mnangagwa. And that actually is one of the things that maybe we should have raised as one of the factors that caused the election. Because people were saying, are you bringing Zimbabwe or ZANU-PF, which is the ruling part of Zimbabwe, are you bringing that tactics here? Are you ZANUificating the country or your party? And there were some incidents where there were issues around the registration of the Zimbabweans so that they could vote. So already you could see that the relationship was power. People are very angry even during the election. There were attempts to go around looking for Zimbabweans who could vote for the BDP. So Boko comes in with that kind of relationship, and his role obviously is to bring back the two countries, to make sure that there is a cordial diplomatic relationship. But it will be tough because of the reasons I've just given. Even Mnangagwa, when he came here, some people sort of booing him because really people relationship of the government of Zimbabwe and the people here is that of a country that is really in trouble, which is not looking after its own people. So Boko will have a very tough time. His proposal of giving Zimbabweans a legal stay in the country, it will have, or it raises mixed feelings from the people. Some welcome it, but there are those that think maybe they are going to be overwhelmed because Botswana is a small population. So we might see a rise of xenophobia. Is possible, but it will depend on how Boko plays it out. Because already the media is claiming he's more closer to the opposition leader in Zimbabwe, Chamisa, than Mnangagwa. So we are still looking at that. We cannot really pronounce because we do not know what he's saying, how he's going to do whatever he's promising, which has positives. One must say that because it is costly to keep deporting people. You are using government funds and so on, and you are also losing artisan skills that could the country could benefit from. So it will depend on how he presents it and how he rolls it out.
Kaiso, what's your take on that?
Yes, it's leading up to elections, with particular reference to the former ruling party, BDP. We saw BDP getting quite close to ZANU-PF, to a point where they even invited them to their national congress this year in the lead up to elections. And we saw videos of ZANU-PF delegates at the BDP Congress making pronouncements about how they will support the BDP at all costs and so forth. So that made a lot of Botswana uncomfortable. That relationship between ZANU-PF and BDP made a lot of Botswana uncomfortable. Link had been in the lead up to elections as well. During this year, the Independent Electoral Commission had been reported to have been in Zimbabwe for a benchmarking mission, and people expressed concern around that, to say, IEC Botswana, shouldn't you be the ones teaching Zimbabwe how free and fair elections are run? But now we see you going to Zimbabwe to say you are benchmarking. So that also made the general citizenry quite uncomfortable. And now, then again, former President Masisi, towards elections, also made pronouncements around allowing Zimbabwean nationals to cross into Botswana without needing passports, but just using national IDs. And there's a lot of backlash from Botswana around that, because they were already suspicious, seeing what had happened in Mozambique with Zimbabwean nationals reported to have voted in the Mozambique elections. So people are quite uncomfortable to say, are we going to see what happened in Mozambique happening in Botswana? So that also contributed to people's sentiments in the lead up to elections. Now, President Boko has been talking about, regularizing the regular Zimbabwean migrants in the country, to try and find a way of having them contribute to the national economy. And like Rendlov is saying, it has its positives, but then you also have to deal with issues of public perception, particularly the perceptions that prevailed leading to elections. It's a fact. We have a lot of Zimbabwean nationals here that are working in the farms, that are working in the homes, as nannies, in the private schools, as teachers, quite a skilled workforce. And most of them are going into jobs that Botswana generally don't want to go into. So I think if one was to be quite fair, it's not so much that they're taking jobs for the national. A lot of the jobs that they're in are jobs that the nationals don't want to do, like housework, being head boys and so forth. But you still need to deal with the issue of public perception. What people believe is what people find a way to work around that, to bring about some sort of consensus and social cohesion. Thank you. Back to you, Vemba.
What is the driver behind the closeness, or what was the driver behind the closeness and the rapprochement between BDP and ZANU-PF? These are two cultures. This one was a democracy. The other one is not known to be a democracy. What brought them together?
That's the question that...
Go ahead. Go ahead, Ra. We can wait for Kahiso when she comes back, but please go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I think it was a personal thing. I think because of the relationship between Masisi and Khama, so when Masisi came in, he kind of wanted to reverse everything that Khama did. And one of that was actually come in a different, Khama had a bad leadership.
We've lost you, Ra Tapelo. We cannot hear you. Not sure what's happening with you. Ra Tapelo, we cannot hear you. There's something about your Bluetooth or your connection.
Yeah, to make relationships with. So that's more like this kind of a style and that you wanted to push.
Okay. Makahiso, we have about 2 minutes left. You wanted, sorry, we lost you there. Can you say what you were saying?
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize. So yes, I was saying the close relationship or the sudden close relationship between the BDP and the ZANU-PF is part of what made the citizenry quite uncomfortable, because Botswana and Zimbabwe as countries have always had diplomatic relations. But what we are seeing in the lead up to elections was, a close relationship between the BDP and the ZANU-PF, to a point where we saw videos of ZANU-PF delegates at the BDP National Congress and them pledging to support the BDP with their campaigns and with the elections as much as possible. So that made people a lot uncomfortable, particularly given what they had seen unfolding in Mozambique in the elections where Zimbabwean nationals were said to have voted. And I think it made people uncomfortable to say, are we going to see this happening in Botswana as well? And linked to that, there had been our Independent Electoral Commission had been going to Zimbabwe for what they called benchmarking missions. That also made people quite uncomfortable because there had been reports of rigging from the 2019 elections. Now you are going into 2024 elections and, you have our own Independent Electoral Commission frequenting Zimbabwe, and people are wondering, shouldn't they be benchmarking from you rather than the other way around? So there was a lot of discomfort around that closeness. Thank you.
The other issue, two issues that I think is worth noting in the last 2 minutes that we have here, is the relationship between the media, the independent media, and the state media, or the state itself. Well, for the 58 years or so, the state controlled the media, and at the expense and detriment of the independent media. They couldn't raise money because there was kind of an unwritten rule that they couldn't really get adverts. People will do adverts on independent media will be penalized. The other challenge is the relationship between civil society. You are running Bokongo, and with the state as well. So those relationships were not necessarily the best. How do you expect those to change under the new administration?
Thank you. Well, our hope and expectations from the new administration, we expect a more open government. We expect a more consultative government. We expect a government that values public participation and provides the necessary framework to ensure public participation. we expect a government that will see the value in having a strong civil society. We expect to see a government that views civil society as partners in national development rather than enemies. And we expect to see a government that would allow civil society to maintain its independence, to provide the necessary oversight to keep government in check. So we are hopeful for a more collaborative, more engaging, more transparent and accountable government. Thank you.
Ra Tapelo, you came from the press, the media, you're still a media consultant. What are your expectations in terms of the relation between the media and the state under this new administration?
Okay, I think for starters, thank you. For starters, when you look at the relationship between the media and the previous government, it was more, we did not have a good legal framework that provided for free media, for free expression, freedom of expression. We actually had bad laws, some of them. We had the Media Practitioners Act of 2008, which was repealed, which never got to work because the media felt uncomfortable with it. And then we had the Media Practitioners Act, another one, which was also not media friendly. And then we did not have the Freedom of Information Act that will actually make it easy for the media to get information, not just the media, but even
Sorry, we've lost Ra Tapelo here. This actually is also coming to an end of our program. On this note, I would like to... Yes, Ra Tapelo, we actually only have 1 minute. Can you wrap it quickly so we can...
Okay, let me just wrap it. Yeah, let me wrap it up. So we expect the coming government to actually correct those things. We already see that some of the new employment actually are people from the private media and from private activism, media activism, who are now being co-opted into the office of the president. So one hopes you are going to see solutions in terms of removing the state media from the government or the office of the president and making it more of a public broadcaster. You are going to see the private media being involved with advertising coming from government, which we not really just kept referred to government media. Yeah, so basically we expect a lot from them.
Thank you, Ra. On this note, I would like to thank our distinguished panelists, Ma Kahiso Molahwa, Ra Tapelo Ndlovu, and Ma Sonia Ahubulahi. We are very thankful to you, our audience, for joining us today. This concludes our session. We wish Botswana well as they engage with the new administration. Thank you.